When you were a child, do you remember when you first became interested in fashion, or were you even interested in fashion? Did you like wearing clothes? Did you read magazines?
I came from St Andrews. No, we weren't interested in fashion in terms of a kind of economic system and the business of fashion. We were interested in clothes. We were completely neurotic about thrift, and I lost my prefect badge for wearing a coat that was too long. I was interested in the kind of power of clothes, and yeah, I loved. I loved indie music and all the kind of image and clothes that went with that. God help me, but it was all about music, and I was much more interested in reading biographies of Andy Warhol when I was 15 than Coco Chanel, and finding out how Nico dressed. It's a university town, so from the age of 13, 14, we were all at the crashing student parties and kind of breaking into student events and things like that. So we were mixing with people that were much older than us, and skinny dipping and bonfires and underage drinking on the golf course, and it's quite a wild place because it's so safe that parents aren't particularly controlling of their children, and seances in the graveyard, and it was no curfews. It wasn't feral, but it was really alive. And I was really lucky, to the extent that actually by the time I went to university myself, I was meeting all these people and thinking they were really boring, or just kind of really naive. Does that sound supercilious? It probably was a wee bit, but
What were your ambitions?
Then?
Yeah.
I came from a single parent family, and my mum had made a load of sacrifices to get us all to university, whatever happened. So I felt a lot of responsibility to her, probably, and I came from a comprehensive school, but full of girls that had been raised by, actually, I can't say my mum was a second wave feminist, but some of our mothers were, and we were really politicised, and we were really engaged with it, and we felt that we had to do well. And don't forget that if you were in secondary school during when sort of 85, 86, 87, we were just all being told that we weren't going to get jobs, and we were going to be on YTS schemes, and the unemployment was rising, and it was going to be doubly difficult for girls. So we were really driven, and I think for a long time I did what I thought I was meant to do, which was to do my degree, to do my first postgraduate, to do my museums course, to do my PhD. I was kind of motoring towards a very particular goal, and it actually wasn't until I stopped that and actually joined SHOWstudio that actually I realised what was for me rather than what I sort of ought to do.
Has your notion of what you're good at changed since then? Because I was going to ask later what you think your greatest skill is, and is it still that
that's
notion?
such a difficult question.
I know, I'm sorry.
Well, I get bored if I don't feel in awe of something or somebody. So actually, probably my propensity is more to work out what I'm terrible at. So it's really for somebody else to say. I'm analytical and I'm very precise. I've got a really strong opinion, and it's probably got even stronger since I've worked in print. And I'm dogged, and I work really hard, and I'm able to take direction, and I can just about take criticism. Just about.
Let's talk a little bit more about your career, because I'm interested, we've skipped a little bit, and I want to go back to talking about when you were working at the Fawcett Library, because I'm just incredibly jealous, personally.
Yeah, that was a great time.
Tell me about being exposed to all those titles, and now obviously you have the collection of your own, but tell me...
Well, remember, I wasn't the librarian, so I wasn't in charge of all those magazines.
But were you pouring through them?
Yeah, of course I was, because that was the collection on which Cynthia White's seminal women's magazines book was based, 1970 book, when people first started thinking about women's magazines. It was amazing. It had the earliest women's magazines. It had Mary Wollstonecraft. It's a fantastic resource. It wasn't, you probably imagine all these kind of researchers in this kind of cool environment. It was a very different culture, and I think that I seemed like an alien to them. So I've just described myself as quite green and very kind of academic and quite serious coming in and earnest coming into SHOWstudio, and I was. But previously, me coming from the National Museum of Photography into them, I remember the first day I walked in and the archivist looked underneath my eyelashes and said, "Are you wearing mascara?" I mean, you just don't think that they weren't a separatist library, but there were some separatist women that used it, and you needed to make arrangements for it. It was quite a culture.
You know, you talk about the Gentlewoman as wanting to do lots of things in the context, I think, that you felt that other magazines weren't doing, and they're important things, like speaking to women warmly. And I think with that implies that other magazines weren't.
Also, the implication with that is you're speaking to women as a reader rather than a consumer. And I think that's a very glib thing to say, but a really important distinction. You know, when you open up our magazine, you're not met with a sea of shopping pages or just like, buy this, like that. No. You know, I like the fact, I'm very proud of the fact that those important, commercially important pages in terms of the kind of geography of a magazine are given over to conversation and not selling. You know, I think there are very few magazines that probably would give a double page spread to a loaf of bread.
Do you find now that when you read other women's magazines, do you feel, you've talked before about disappointment, and I am using things you said in other interviews against you now.
Yeah, how
but I think there's something interesting in that though, because I feel like, you know, it shouldn't be new or revolutionary to have a magazine that celebrates women rather than kind of tries to make them aspire to be something that they perhaps cannot be. And do you feel that still? Do you ever look at other magazines now, and I'm sure you have lots of peers in the industry who you hugely respect, but look at the titles they produce and not understand why they're producing something that would make women feel that way?
It would have been very easy for me to say, as a kind of lover of certain magazines, when I was online and I didn't even know how little I knew about producing a magazine, to say, you know, women's magazines should be better. But now that I've done it, I realise you can make magazines better, and you can actually make other magazines better because they start to copy you. So we're, you know, we sell 96,000 issues twice a year, so we don't have the circulation of, you know, a mass magazine, but you can make a difference. It's just much harder work.
Obviously, before you were editor of The Gentlewoman, you worked at SHOWstudio, this website, for a number of years. And you left that position to go and be chair of fashion imagery at the London College of Fashion. Tell me a bit about what sparked that decision to leave SHOWstudio and to go back into academia and education.
I didn't want to go and work for a competitor. I was in love with SHOWstudio and I didn't want to leave.
Why did you leave?
Just I knew it was time to, you know. And you know, I'd got to the sort of stroppy teenager stage where I probably thought I knew best. So it was time to let my parents find a new editor, you know. And no, you know, I've worked for 7 years. It was a long time. I'd done a lot of projects, and you know, I thought it was. And I started thinking, well, maybe I'll do some of my own projects, which I did, and I really enjoyed doing it, but not as much as when I was in SHOWstudio on the phone, going, yeah, no, and letting other people finish my sentences and come back to me better than I could do it myself. The lesson was that I thought I was more greedy about my own authorship, and I'd like things with my name at the bottom and that were just mine. And by leaving, I learned that I just wanted to be working on the best project that wasn't necessarily my own. And I wanted to be around clever people. I was with clever people at the college, but you know, the amazing thing about fashion, of course, is everybody thinks we're all, you know, idiots, and actually the most intelligent people that you're ever going to meet work in this industry, because everybody wants their jobs and they've got to be the best they could possibly be, otherwise they'd be out.
Do you think that's still the case? Do you ever, I'm interested, I don't know how much you have this, but whether when you're interacting with younger people that are coming into the industry, and I think people talk frequently, and it's a kind of a tired debate about how democratised fashion has become, but I think there's a lot of people who come into fashion now, perhaps even more because they're interested in shopping or product, or...
We all know what we're getting into because there's reality programmes about it, etc. But then at the same time, we both know that actually the people that are any good in this industry are not at the parties because they're working. And they're not dressed up like in fancy dress, you know, because they're serious about clothes. And, you know, they don't regard themselves as models.
There has been a huge proliferation of those people who make a career in fashion off their looks or off their wardrobe. And do you ever find yourself at events where you are seen as a peer to those people and find that quite, not difficult, that sounds very intellectually snobby, but do you find a sense of kind of less in common with the people in your same industry?
Well, I am a peer of those people, and I don't look down on it because I'm just interested in characters. It's not like the reason I work on the magazine is because I love interesting women, and some of them might be interesting women. So it's not like I'm sitting there thinking, how dare you besmirch my profession, because I'm not there as an editor. I'm still there because I love the subject. And also, let's remember, I've done lots of different jobs around this subject. I've been a curator, I've been a writer, I've been a website editor, I've been a magazine editor. It's not like I just want people to see me as the best journalist, and any other meagre journalists that I don't think are doing a good job kind of somehow undermine me. That's not the way I see it at all.
I want to take things in a slightly different tack, and there's something that you mentioned in a previous interview pertaining to the Gentlewoman. You said sometimes the biggest part of your work is trying to persuade women that you want to be in the Gentlewoman to be in the Gentlewoman, because often they don't want to be in a fashion magazine. Tell me more about that, because that must be incredibly frustrating to kind of have to undo other people's work in a way.
It's a really important thing to do, though, in that any fool can make a 15-year-old look good in a sample. Let's put that to the side. The real work is making women look great and feel confident in clothes that weren't designed for their bodies. And add to that, in terms of commissioning unexpected women to be in your scientists or, I don't know, an astronaut. Of course they're going to hear, so you're a woman's magazine, now what does that call to mind? They're like that, so you'd like to photograph me. Now they're thinking how they're going to be represented. First of all, they're not going to have an option of wearing their own clothes. They're going to think, you're going to force me into something that I don't really like and I feel really uncomfortable, and then I sit on the set and the stylist comes over and the hair and makeup and everybody's watching thinking, oh God, she's really big, or whatever. That's what they think they're going to have to go through. And then they're going to get onto the set and they don't really like the pictures, and then they're going to go back into their profession and they're going to be at the conference where they're representing, women in neurology, and they're going to think that their male colleagues are saying, do you see that picture of her in that women's magazine? They're going to think they're going to undo all the work that they did in their career by associating with fashion. That they're actually vain and vapid after all. Don't forget their Fields Medal or whatever it was that they got, or their Nobel Peace Prize nomination. They were in the women's pages of a newspaper and they looked foolish. So that's what happens as soon as I ring up. They've got that don't go, don't do it. So my job is to, of course, show them the magazine. Hopefully they see that they're in a safer pair of hands than that.
I've also read you say in previous interviews how, naturally the Gentlewoman's a feminist magazine because it's made by feminist people, which I think is a really smart way of putting that, not wanting to make feminism an aesthetic or to sort of...
well, it's just not a magazine about feminism.
Yeah, it's a
we just
feminist
assume that the people we work with would like to, respect equality in terms of ethnicity, in terms of, economically, those are just the kind of, I'm Scottish,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm very interested in the pop feminist debate, but I don't commission things about that.
Yeah.
You might say the essays that we do about modern manners, about women in public toilets, or women in drinking alone at the bar, or in this issue we've done women in hosting. It's not really women it's about hosting. Those are about the politics of modern life, and I'm kind of more interested in doing it that way than to try and kind of hitch our wagons to a kind of fashionable debate, because it just seems like common sense to me. I don't know what else to say about it. Would you like equal pay?
Obviously.
Thank you, yes.
It's interesting because you talk about this idea of wanting to work with people who share the same values, and just, I've always wondered about the cover that you shot with Angela Lansbury with Terry Richardson, because I think some people would have seen that as a strange fit for you. Was it a difficult decision to work with him?
No, absolutely not. He'd done amazing images of his own mother, and I knew he'd take really respectful pictures of her. No, I think he did really nice pictures for us in that story.
Yeah, I think the pictures are beautiful, but were you worried about the message that it would send? That the aesthetic is more important than...
It was a couple of years ago, and it was preceded a lot of the discussion that's being had at the moment. All I can judge is the way that he conducted himself on that set. which was extremely respectfully. And you know, I have to take it at face value. I mean, if any of our photographers were known to misbehave, we wouldn't want to work with them. But Terry Richardson had a long-standing relationship with our company through obviously taking pretty cheeky pictures for Butt magazine, and photographing for Fantastic Man and the Gentlewoman. And he did an amazing job in that context. You know, I'm aware of the debate, but you know, I don't want to kind of fan the flames of it. But I don't think it's helpful to confuse somebody's personal conduct on set with the content of their images. You know, I think that I'm all for happy, fun, go for it pictures of sex in fashion. I'd much rather see those than pictures of passive 15-year-olds in seedy hotel rooms being sort of spied on by photographers. I'm not interested in that kind of photography. I'd rather see kind of going for it people with sexual content. That's personal taste.
I'm interested in the idea of the passive woman, because I think that's one thing that's really interesting with the Gentlewoman. You've said this before, you know, it's never about fantasy, it's never about making a woman this kind of othered creature. You know,
for us, I mean, I can see when it's done extremely well elsewhere, but for us, no, it's we for the most part, and if we can achieve it, you can't always, I'd like to depict women doing stuff.